Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast about how we make meaning of our lives and experience the miracle of living. In this episode, how to recover when things can't ever be the same. I actually recorded this episode about 3 years ago, before I'd experienced the greatest traumas in my own life. I make different meaning from the message you're about to hear now. The idea of recovering from a trauma or tragedy is different for me now. To recover seems like, just by the word itself, getting back to normal, back to where you were. But with my experience now, and maybe yours, this is impossible. It's like having adult kids and wanting to go back to when they were little. You just can't. You must recover to a new existence, in essence. So my guest here, Dr. Neeta Bhushan. When Neeta was 16 years old, her mom died. When she was 17 years old, her brother died. Then when she was 19, her dad died. She became caregiver for her younger brother. She, quote, recovered and started a successful cosmetic dentist business. She married and then divorced from an abusive marriage. She finally went on a pretty epic journey and found real recovery, and later founded the Global Grit Institute and co-founded the Dharma Coaching Institute. She's got a really large following online, a really popular podcast called The Brave Table, where people tune in to hear her guidance on dealing with the hardships of life. I met Neeta after she published her book called That Sucked, Now What? How to Embrace the Joy in Chaos and Find Magic in the Mess. So in this message you're about to hear, this discussion, we cover deep territory in regard to what resilience and recovery really is and how it differs for each of us depending on, well, a lot. So coming up next, my discussion with Neeta Bhushan, and as she says, how to embrace joy in chaos and find magic in the mess. Neeta, I honestly want to start deep, if that's okay with you. You ready?
Let's go. I'm with you.
I mean, well, my book's coming out on Drive. It's called What Drives You. It's on Drive. And, to some degree, it's that holy grail question of why are some people driven? Why are they not? And of course, in the book, I break that down somewhat, but there's still somewhat of an unknown factor. And as we look at your book about, that sucked and ultimately being resilient and coming out of that before you became who you are now.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom dies when you're 16.
Yeah.
Brother dies at 17. Dad dies at 19. Unreal. You become a caregiver for your younger brother, and then boom, you start grinding away to get to where you own a medical practice and you're, successful in that aspect. And then you go on to do what you're doing now. But back then, when you look at Neeta back then and you're writing this book and breaking this stuff down and you look back and go, what were the ingredients? What was the catalyst or the grain back then, the seed back then that you look back and go, I can kind of see why I recovered well, why it didn't overcome me and take me down. Do you see that, or do you look back a little bit with a bit of mystery as well?
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, it's taken me a really long time to get to this point.
Yeah.
And I think that when I was going through the grind, as you called it, and really the dark moments, I think that hero's journey that if we say yes to, we all tend to experience.
Yeah.
But those were some of the, the darkest times of my life. I mean, I know that there are people who go through tragedies and don't make it out. I know that even in my situation, someone who probably would have the same kind of upbringing could have started a family early, dropped out of high school, got into drugs, all of these things. I had my own coping mechanisms, which we'll get into. And, it's all of those ingredients that I'll share, now I have a framework for, because things were so bad in the beginning that, walking through that fire, walking through that tunnel, many days, I'm like, is this over? Are we done here? When things were so bad, when my mom had she had a 6-year battle of cancer, and she got sick when I was 10. So, at 10 years old, your friends are, I don't know, playing with dolls. I'm like cooking eggs for my family, making breakfast, families coming over to see my mom, paying the respects. I grew up in like my parents were immigrants. My dad was from India. My mom was from the Philippines. So there's cultural nuances there as well, where, you're taught to study, and get straight A's, and you couldn't come home with less than an A. And so on top of that, plus the tragedy that we were facing, with my mom at such a young age. So it already primed me for, okay, how can I be a good girl? Okay. So that was the first thing. How could I be good so that I can be accepted by my parents and I can not cause any trouble, kind of fly under the radar? And this would then be one of the leading forces for when I would then become a teenager and, then lose my mom to cancer, lose my brother, just out of the blue, a year later. And he went through, just an asthma attack and had this whole collapse with his friend in front of, he was walking, with his friend, and just died pretty much on the spot.
Wow.
Yeah, it took me years, in order to just talk about that, because sudden death, I think, is just a really hard one to swallow, especially when you're so young. And we were very close in age; we were about 16 months apart. And so, and the one thing my dad would always say is, Neeta, you are resilient, you are strong, and so priming me for all of these like mantras, which I would then, put in the back of my head.
Right.
And so I was taught, okay, I was strong. I'm strong. I'm strong. So that meant strong girls don't cry. We don't show emotion. We don't break. And so that led me to a whole period of, okay, I'm going to overachieve, which was my coping mechanism. Right. Overwork. I'm going to be constantly busy, because the opposite of busyness meant you were lazy, which again was these were the value systems that were ingrained in me young. And so, you never took a day off, because my mom never took a day off. And well, you see what happened to my mom. Yeah. And so that there were these cycles and these patterns. And so one of the things that, was one of the ingredients that got me out of this tough time. And I started to recognize it when I was in college. And there's a chapter in my book where I talk about really being just, I almost lost it when they told me that my dad had stage 4 lung cancer. They meaning the doctors. And, just to give everybody context around what happened, we were already starting to climb out of this very dark cloud of grief and just sadness. And to give you cultural context, when a man loses his wife in the Indian culture, it's almost like you're kind of ousted from society, or at least that's what was happening for him. It wasn't like people didn't know what to say.
Wow.
A single dad, raising his 3 kids, now 2 kids. And so they didn't really know how to support. They did the best that they could. Like I said, we were surrounded by a lot of family, a lot of extended family, but his friendships, it was just harder for him to cope. And so, and of course that led him to deep depression and to deep darkness, where I was at one point working 3 jobs just to support our family. And so I remember this, my dad, we got him on the dating apps. It was like, AOL, the dial up. And I think you were like talking about, in chat rooms back then. And so we were really excited, my brother Vinay and I, and we decided to dye his hair black, because he had kind of like this silver fox hair, because we were going to a wedding for the first time. And if you know anything about Indian weddings or, Asian weddings, it's a big deal. And so as we were dyeing his hair, basically, I guess he was allergic to the dye and got an allergic reaction.
Oh,
and
no.
so right away, immediately, where if you ever know anything about PTSD, I'm starting to have this panic attack. I'm like, oh no, not again, not again. No, no, no. And so we called the ambulance. They came, to pick him up, and we go and they do all of these tests. So we get back to the same hospital, mind you, the same hospital where my mom was, my brother was. So, my dad is there, and they're doing all these tests, and for whatever reason, they couldn't find out, how the dye caused this major allergic reaction where his face literally swelled up twice the size. And they said he has stage 4 lung cancer. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He's like in the best shape of his life. He was jogging 6 miles a day. He's now, on all of these, not apps, but like, in these chat room, speaking to women, and we're going to this wedding. You're lying. And I couldn't believe it. And I had so much rage and so much anger. And I had to tame it down, because I'm like, okay, I'm a good girl. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to yell, but I wanted to just give it to these doctors, because I thought, 17, pretty much 18 years old at this point. And I'm, so angry. And, 10 months later, he passed away. And so at 19, I'm walking through this really, really long tunnel, and I'm trying to see the light of day. And one of the things that I needed to make clear and peace with was my upbringing, because I couldn't change that.
Yeah.
I couldn't pretend that it didn't happen, even though I tried to. Basically, talking about and getting out of our circumstances when we cannot control them, we have to really look and see what our current environment is. Well, I knew my current environment was just dark, gloomy, grim, and I was going through probably what I would now call depression back then. I didn't have the words for it. I didn't know, what that looked like, but to experience joy on the other side of that, and then to go back and say, wow, that was a really dark time. And thank God I had, people checking on us. We had, the school nurses obviously thinking that's, they were paying close attention, because they wanted to make sure we weren't going to harm ourselves, just because of the tragedy and the PTSD that my brother and I had gone through. And so the first part of this is forgiving our past. And, that was everything for me. Forgiving the fact that I was so young when all of this happened. Forgiving the fact that there was nothing that I could do to change my mom. And, many times as children, I think we blame it on ourselves. And you hear people say, oh, when my parents got divorced, maybe it was on me. Or, a lot of times the trauma is passed down because one parent gets so angry, but it's not towards the child, but the child then kind of internalizes it. Right. So for me, it was very, very important that heading into my 20s, and even now with everything that I do, and it's literally one of the factors that I talk about in the book called How to Strengthen Your Bounce Factor. And this literally is how to build that audacious resilience. And I'm not talking about mental toughness and resiliency like what my dad used to pound in me in my head. It's the complete, I wouldn't say opposite of that, but it's a yes and. It's the toughness, but we also have to be compassionate to ourselves. And I think for the longest time I wasn't, because I remember so vividly having, gotten off the plane in Rome, Italy. I was about 20 years old. First time ever, full freedom, full like, what is going on here? I can see why everybody goes to Italy. Because if you've ever been to Italy in the summer, all the young kids, they go to study abroad. And that's exactly what I was doing. So the first time in my life, I could actually recreate who I was. Because the one thing a young person who's been through a lot of stuff does not want to share is, hey, where are you from? And what do your parents do? Because that would ultimately leave you as the outcast. And I definitely didn't want to go there.
Neeta, I do want to ask, this is because you talked about that being strong, right? That if we hear your story, It's easy to look at the fact that, man, you took care of things, you did what needed to be done, you overcame, in quotes, you overcame, you're an overcomer, you kicked butt, it didn't overcome you, you weren't a victim, you're good. And yet what you're talking about here, the whole package of bouncing back, because what I see in that is, yeah, you overcame the circumstances well, but that's not mental health. That's not your long-term wellness. And for one, I understand that. I understand it's what got me into on the podium in professional athletics, man. You kill it. You do what you got to do. And that's what we applaud today. And that's what we applaud. It's what we love. We love the superhero who's mentally an absolute wreck, and that's going to manifest later in life. But for the moment in the limelight, it looks good. And I hear you talking about, okay, you saw that and you saw the dark side of it. That's it. And of course, that's so much of what the book is coming. So as what you're talking about now, that the bounce factor is it's not just standing back up, because we put so much focus on that. And you can stand up and be just as punch drunk and ignorant as you were and keep fighting and get knocked down 100 times if you don't learn something. And you're telling us about what to learn.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the first part of the book, I talk about having a chip on your shoulder, because I definitely had a chip on my shoulder. I wanted to prove everyone wrong.
Who wouldn't? Yeah.
Of course. And you see all of these like stories of athletes. And I even, talk about some of my favorite athletes like Serena Williams, the sisters, inside my book, and how, at such a young age to be trained in that. And we see this now with young people and their mental health in terms of, these athletes who we're priming, and we're just priming them, and we're priming them. But the same thing goes for having this space to actually say, you know what, I'm actually not feeling okay. Yeah. And I don't know how to feel otherwise, because there was an adrenaline rush through my teen years to get through it and to overcome and to rise and to prove everybody wrong, until, like I said, I got to my time in Italy. And mind you, those 2 months were the most life-changing, but they really were so instrumental in how I would then lead the next 15 years of my life. And so this would also introduce me to the concept of, these Italian philosophers, because I was studying Italian philosophy and Stoicism, and how, the Stoics really, really prided themselves on, amor fati. And amor fati just means love of one's fate. Because at this point of my life, there was a lot of me trying to prove everybody wrong, me not wanting to, I was kind of stonewalling when people would ask, because I didn't want to let everybody in. I didn't want to be vulnerable. I wanted to appear strong. But what I did realize was, okay, I could actually just turn this back on people. When people were asking me, oh, tell me about where'd you grow up? Did you play any sports? Instead of saying, well, actually, no, I grew up in the hospital settings, watching both my parents, actually, they'd be like, oh, you're the weird kid. But this is where I started to learn, okay, let's focus it back on them. I guess you can say present day, podcasting.
I was going to say, that makes a great podcaster. Skill number one. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but I think it also led me to really understand, oh, okay, you can pick and choose who you want to let into your inner circle. Yeah. And this concept of amor fati really allowed me to say, wow, instead of why is this happening to me? Why am I in this victim state of like, why did my parents have to die? Instead of that, to, okay, well, this is, love of one's fate. That's what Marcus Aurelius talked about. That's what I was learning in Italian philosophy class. So that really shifted the way that I would approach, all right, kind of this everything happens for a reason, but to love exactly the mess that we are in, to love it. And it's kind of extrapolated to even how later on in the book, I talk about how to fly forward. And many times when we have a sucky situation, a breakup, a marriage crack, a betrayal, somebody cheats, a medical diagnosis, cancer diagnosis, to be able to love that part of yourself, because we often reject that. And that then leads to shame, and it leads to, guilt, and it leads to shutting down, and it leads to the self-sabotage, which I know so many athletes learn early on. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. And we ruminate these thoughts in our head, which then causes us to self-sabotage even, what we're actually going through.
I want to ask about that, because thus far we've been talking about your past and these things that happened to you, which makes sense. The book's titled That Sucked. That Sucked. That thing over there that took my family out. That sucked. The fact that, this happened to me, that sucked. Now you're talking about an athlete there. So often there, just to jump to the other side where we look at that, and when we have that hard thing happen, that thing that sucks happen, and we feel responsible. No, you just talked about that, the mess that we're in. I created that mess. I'm the one that failed. I didn't achieve X, Y, Z. So now I have, because I come on that side of it. I didn't have a whole lot of things happen. I didn't have traumas, or the acute ones, traumas and tragedies in life, to where I felt like a victim. I was on the other side of, no, I am Superman. I'm responsible for everything. I'm not a victim. And then I'm a perfectionist. I can never add up, and I suck. So my book says I sucked, not that sucked. And either way, and you're holding both of them, I know, but so often it's the victim aspect of that happened to me. But over here, the things where we look at and go, no, I did that, man. I failed. I screwed up. I made the mistake. And holding that sometimes feels, well, and I was going to say feels harder. It depends on your upbringing and where you came from and what you experienced. But my gosh, so hard when we take personal responsibility and we think, as you talk about so much in the book, I made that mistake. I didn't add up, and I caused that. That is me.
Yeah. And if we get stuck in that, because, I do talk about, there's two types of camps. Basically, something bad happens, and, we start internalizing, oh crap, okay, that was totally me. I did this. I fucked up. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy of anything, because we're so used to winning the medals. We're so used to placing first or second. And, what I talk about in the book is this zero-sum game. And we're learning this when we are young. My son now is 4 years old, and he's learning that if he does not win, like, he's a loser. And then, he starts internalizing it. And so we're like, okay, no. And this is why, like, sports is so important, because then you kind of see, well, there's two teams, but literally there can only be one winner and one loser, right? That's what it is. Zero-sum game. But then how do we then internalize those things to then breed the shame, the guilt, that we're taking it on as if we were the ones in control? And so that's the one camp of folks that grow up. The other camp is the one that, blames it on everybody else. Mm-hmm. And, they don't want to really sit in the suck, because the suck is too painful to accept. So they're like, you did this, and they're turning outward. And many times it is being in that victim state of, you did this to me, or I didn't have enough, so, it's your fault. And so they don't take personal responsibility. Either one is, it's embracing the suck in a way where it actually should be accepting of our humanity.
What I did a third way there, where I said, I didn't blame someone else, but I just said, I suck. That was where I turned, as opposed to coming back to where you were a second ago, in essence, the forgiving myself, the having compassion for myself, because I didn't want to sit in those negative emotions. Sure. I still don't. I'm learning. My therapist is teaching me, to sit in that and feel it, and embrace it, accept it, sit in it, and forgive self as well. But you mentioned a minute ago the hero's journey, and and you said something to the effect of, if we are willing to embrace it. Mm-hmm. So we can all sit in our comfort spot in the safety zone, but if we're going to step out and do something that's worthwhile to us and worthwhile to humanity, in essence, if we're going to go out there, we're going to face a challenge. We cannot be perfect. We're going to have a failure. And in that, I see a lot of people, a lot of kids these days who never really have the opportunity to fail. I like sports in that aspect. I'm not a huge sports fan these days, but looking at my own kids and seeing, it is a zero-sum game, but you go out there and you can't even participate without you can't step on the court. You talk about Serena Williams. If you're going to go play tennis and you have the ability to be number one on planet Earth, the day you step out there, you're going to suck. And you've got to allow that. And we're kind of okay with that on sport. Okay, yeah, I know I'm going to be bad until I get good. But dude, we don't do that in our life and realize if you're going to step out of college, get that first job, you're probably going to have a failure unless you totally play it safe. And if you totally play it safe, you're not going to be that much value and you're probably going to get canned anyway. So you're you might as well be the hero, right? Or step out and try to do something.
Right. To embrace the suck.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild. I even have, a challenge where we challenge people, all right, suck for something, suck at something for 10 days and see if you can increase that to 20 days. Because so often, and I'm a recovering perfectionist as well, where we strive for a certain level of excellence, but then we're so afraid to make that mistake. And we're not, and because our society really applauds the perfection, the ideals, the winning, and we don't really give much room to cry about the loss or cry about what didn't work out or the mistakes that we made or the failures and the setbacks and the challenges. We kind of gloss over it. We kind of bypass it and we're like, okay, on to the next one. It's like, oh, wait. Oh, okay. We're going to gloss over that again so that when that same trigger comes up in the form of a friend that berates you or a colleague that stabs you in the back or, whatever, we start to then harness and build this resentment that kind of stews. Yeah. And then, of course, sometimes it releases in that way, probably not in the healthiest way too.
Here's something you got me thinking about in regards to how we look at the failure, the suck, the whatever happened, that if I have a friend, my spouse, a family, one of my kids, of course, but even just a friend, and they're going along and telling me, XYZ happened and, I did this and totally failed and they're berating themselves and feel terrible. And I'm kind of looking and going, I want to have compassion for them, but I'm also going, it's just a thing. It's just so easy for me to see it as just this little thing. Here's this great person. They did that, didn't work out. And it's not a big deal. And I'm so sorry, but let's just go on. When it happens to me, it's everything. When it happens to us, it's everything. And you got me thinking about how can I put that kind of back to your self-forgiveness? Yeah. How can I put that cap on and not internalize it so in depth as we can so easily see somebody else doing and think, oh my gosh, why are they just freaking out? It's not that big a thing, but we do. I wish we could step back out of ourselves and do what feels so easy with other people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because we're, the analogy that I usually share is we are so harsh on ourselves, but would we actually say the same thing if our best friend was going through a rough time? And, many times we're like, oh gosh, you're such an idiot or you're such a failure. Like we're just kind of this rumination of thoughts in our minds. Yeah. And most often it's because we've never given ourselves permission to release the pressure valve. And I have this one activity in the book where basically all we have to do is just release the pressure valve. What does that actually mean? Okay, well, when we're having a really sucky experience, you get that bad email, you get that bad text message, you looked at your stock portfolio, whatever the case is, and you're like, okay, what is this? Well, say it, basically articulate what you're feeling to notice the sensation that's happening. So notice that, all right, I'm starting to breathe shallow. Yeah. I'm starting to huff and puff. I'm starting to kind of go in my head and I'm starting to self-critique myself and to just identify the emotion that I'm feeling. All right, I am feeling really, dumb right now for overreacting, or I am feeling really anxious right now. I feel like I'm having a panic attack, or I'm feeling really jealous. So to actually say these things, many times it's in our head, but when we say it and we identify it, it's less daunting. That's the way that we actually can release the pressure valve.
Mirror that against venting, because I'm sure you've heard like I have. So if we take that and we just start raging at the machine and criticizing and blaming, we've got a lot of research now saying, dude, that venting just throws gas on the fire. So you're not talking about that. So reconcile that against that.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, venting is just gonna, blow it up. Right. But what we're doing, because in the venting, when you're doing that, what you're doing is you're going into a full spiral, and we're spiraling into our self-doubt, into our self-loathing, into our self-criticism versus, and you're taking the identity of that. You're saying, I'm an idiot, or I can't do anything right, or I, effing suck. Right. That's taking the identity of that. Instead, you can still process an emotion, and you can get rageful, you can get angry, and that's actually a good thing, right? But we've got to do it in a way where we're identifying the feeling that we're feeling. We're not castrating ourselves and putting ourselves down. So a healthy way to do this is, instead of saying, I'm an idiot, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. That blank. I'm feeling very anxious right now. I'm feeling really overwhelmed, because, the underbelly of like, I'm feeling, or I'm an idiot, or I can't do anything right. What's the underbelly of that? What's the actual feeling? Well, I feel that I'm not worthy. Okay. Well, that's really deep. All right. Well, why do we feel unworthy? Well, this is the third time I've tried to do something and I can't do it. Okay. Do we need support? Can we say that out loud, that maybe I need support? Now, this is like jumping ahead, but when we actually are present to the moment of feeling, instead of ruminating in our head, because this is what we're ruminating and we're venting. But when we're venting, we're actually saying things to diminish ourselves, instead of saying, okay, I need a pause, I need a break, I need to breathe. And usually when we put our hand over our heart, this is a physical signal that actually helps us calm our nervous system. Scientists have used this for decades, and we all know that the dose hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, basically is released when we actually put our hand over our heart. It's just a way to say, all right, you got this. It's not so bad. You got this. We can pause and we can get some oxygen in our body. And now we can say, wow, I am feeling blank, because we are not internalizing it. We're not taking it on as our identity. We can still rage. We can still get angry, and we can still feel what's happening, because majority of us will clench our fists. Majority of us will raise our shoulders to our ears, and will, like for myself, I clench my jaws. Some people get a massive, tension headache in their head. Some of us need to step up or stand up and start walking and pacing, because we need to move that energy. And so, the thing is we judge ourselves for doing all of this. But these are natural ways that we can process our emotion without punching a wall. Maybe get a boxing,
Sure.
I'm starting to like create this like rage room in our garage, actually. And it's great because it's teaching my kids to actually release big emotions. So I have a pillow in that, but my son goes to Taekwondo, or Life Keto, which is like a mixed martial arts. And so they have these like, you probably know this, but these big pillows that you hold it and then they kick. And I'm like, I need one of these so that like we can start, punching it, because the boxing bags are so heavy, but you can so a bean bag, something, but to allow yourself to release that anger.
I didn't know those existed. So I just got a text this morning from Brianna Brown Keene. She's an actress, and she's been on the show, and she's starting a podcast. So she sent me a thing, and she has just she and her husband went to, they live in LA, I think, a rage room. Like you can go pay to go to a rage. I had no idea. But
oh yes.
So I like that. I want to ask you though. You're on judgment. I mean, huge topic, and something in your talking about that in your book. You talked about worth. So my folks, they've heard me be talking about this recently, because it's where my therapist has me talking about is my self-worth. because I came up in that feeling of I got to perform, I got to achieve for everybody for my self-worth. So it's not there, right? So, okay, so we look at that. So we did something bad happens. And I'm going to use a story out of your book because it's a great place to go. And I'm going to try to be as tactful as I can and compassionate as I can with this. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
So you tell a story about a girl in your book, and she is with a guy. They're super close. They're talking babies, whatever. And then he breaks up with her. Mm-hmm. And then, pretty quick, she kind of seems resilient, bounces back, right? And finds another guy, and whirlwind, everything seems great. And he totally ghosts her. And then I stopped reading there because I had my question. I didn't want to know anymore because we'll talk about it now. Because right there, we're saying, okay, this is not, don't judge yourself. Let's use the words. This is not your self-worth. Okay. This is not terrible. So, pick yourself up and bounce back. Okay. Yes. Not your self-worth. And yet we do make mistakes sometimes that we do have responsibility for. And you said the word awareness. It is a good place. So I'm going to put that and you play with it then. For her to say, okay, gosh, let's say it happens 2 more times. She meets people, she's beautiful, she's a good conversation. They talk, they have a whirlwind time, and then these guys are gone. At some point, you kind of go, well, let's you're awesome, but let's do a little audit here. Maybe something's up, and it's not that you're bad. It's not against your self-worth, but no different than stepping on the tennis court. I may be the best athlete in the world, but if I've never played tennis, I'm gonna suck. So I'm awesome. Just don't know how to play tennis well. So maybe there's some relational, I like the word ignorance because ignorance does not mean dumb. It does not mean unintelligent. You can be Einstein and be ignorant of playing tennis because he's never done it. Okay. So play with that because I feel like we tend to polarize and it's just, oh, I suck. No, you don't. You're awesome. But you might have some blind spots. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I know the client that you're talking about. And let's face it, we do have, we've heard stories about this. It's probably happened to us as well. It's very easy to ghost people, in this stage of the dating game. But what we're really talking about and we're really peeling back after is, I think this was Pri. And in Pri's case, yeah, she went into spiral mode. Pity party of one. Why me? Why is this happening? Why am I not dateable? Am I not going to find my next person? And so we start thinking that we are not good enough, that what we're doing is not good enough, that we're never going to find love again in this situation.
And can I put another analogy for you? Let's say you're out there as a striving entrepreneur and it's now your 3rd business that you've totally failed and you're thinking, I'm just undateable. And over here thinking, well, I just have no business, starting a bit or running a business or whatever. And we're going to discount the whole thing as opposed to, okay, so keep going.
Yeah. Or as opposed to, this is where we take the personal responsibility. This is where we start building, our bounce factor and we start looking at our past. So that first aspect that I kind of alluded to earlier, the first building block is, looking at your past or your upbringing. All right. Well, what about it? Okay. Well, for her in this situation, or even the entrepreneur that failed 3 different businesses, what were you told about success growing up? Whether it was in a relationship, whether it was just yourself, did it mean that you had to win all the games? Did it mean that you had to be, the prettiest one in the room? Whatever the case is, but were you, praised on your achievements? Did you have to perform? All of these kind of strings that we have that lead back into who that little boy or that little girl was that wanted that attention way back when. And now we're actually seeing this play out in the failed business or in the failed relationship, because then we think, wow, I am not good enough, or there might not be enough for me to partake in. There's 3 fear cultures that come up. And the first fear culture, which starts to happen, is We think I'm not good enough, or we think, okay, there's not very many good partners out there, or there's not, all of the businesses are saturated. How can I actually put another business into play? There is not enough, right? So that's the scarcity mindset. And then the last one is, this is not good enough. This is not good enough. So what I'm working on is not good enough. This relationship isn't good enough, and that's where we self-sabotage, and then we throw it to the shit. And so that's where we have to then look back and say, wow, look at my patterns in relationship.
Yeah.
What were the actual factors here? Or what's been my pattern in my leadership style? What are the gaps? And it's so hard when we are coming from that victim place. And if we don't acknowledge that, oh, wow, this is a really sucky moment. It sucks to be in this. And that's the uncomfortable spot that we have to kind of move through in order to get to the other side, to say, all right, I know it's not just me, but I know that's where the now what comes in. There's a whole process around that sucked. And first, it's to embrace the suck, acknowledge what sucked, sit in the suck, and embrace the feelings around the suckiness. And what, if anything, is there a meaning that you make from that suck? And this is where most people get, confused about, because then they think, well, I suck, or I'm not good enough, or gosh, I'm just not good at this. Well, okay, fine. Feel those emotions, because what does that make you feel? That makes me feel unworthy. That makes me feel stupid. That makes me feel unlovable. That makes me feel, shitty, crappy, whatever. But this is where we identify those feelings. We don't take it on, but we say, I'm feeling X. And then we say, all right, well, what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen overnight. Like, it's not going to be, all right, you go through a breakup and right away, what can I learn from this relationship? No, it doesn't work that way. You might sit in the suck for a longer period of time. Most people, highly ambitious people, high functioning, drive people, they don't want to sit in the suck. They're like, because our society has primed us to say, all right, bounce back, let's go, stand up, let's go, let's fly forward. What I'm saying is, give yourself permission to suck. You won't get stuck in it, I promise, because the actual emotional sensations of feeling the bigness of our feelings is, yeah, we let out a cry, or we let out a scream, or we let out rage, and we may crumple papers, or, punch a pillow or something like that. But then underneath it is somebody that's just feeling a little hurt.
Yeah.
And it's giving agency to that little boy or that little girl in you that, didn't win on the soccer field, or did fail the first few of her tests. And you're giving space for that little girl or little boy to heal, because that's the foundation, and that's the cycle of healing. And then we can move to the now what.
Bouncing back, I mean, your first category in there, and you've mentioned it multiple times here, and you just, hit on it there, is our upbringing. And in looking at that, right away, Neeta, I thought, that's something that I was given as a gift, was the ability, kind of the hero's journey to go off, pursue what you want to. You have a failure, man, that's how you learn. And given that faith on a silver platter, that, man, it's okay not to knock it out of the park. You can't until you got to keep failing and trying until you do. And I had parents who were entrepreneurial parents, so I couldn't not see their failures and stuff, and to see that failure would happen in a business, in the sense money, whatever.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, we had dinner and we watched, Dallas or Dukes of Hazzard. I grew up in Kentucky. We talked about that. So, and life goes on. Doesn't mean that they're not a little stressed, that they're a little sad or whatever, but life still goes on. And as a kid, next day I go to school and it's okay. It didn't wreck me. And I've since then found what a gift that I wasn't shielded from that, and how rare that is, that the majority of us, grow up and security and comfort is kind of the focus, which you're a parent. I mean, you don't want to just say, hey kid, you're going to learn today. I'm going to kick you out. Come back in a few days, see if you make it. But letting them see the trials, let them sit in the suck with you or be aware of the suck is such a gift. So I was given that. And as I've gotten older, realized how rare that is. And that people, when they're not exposed to that, then to come out, especially if they are really taken care of with great intending caregivers, and they go into school, and school for most people is not dramatic. If you do the homework and do this test, you're going to be okay. And you come out, and then you go to college and things are still kind of okay. And now you get a job, and that first failure comes. And we know that we've got a generation who seems to be statistically kind of devastated when somebody says, no, actually, dude, that sucked. You did a bad job. And we can't handle that. And so, going back to the upbringing, I think to me, it's just, and your book really brought it out, it's just so profound, and the value in going back and understanding, were you given some strength in this bounce back in this, or were you totally shielded? So you're a newbie at this. This is going to be, this is going to take a while.
Well, yeah. And I love that you bring that up, because, it's a lot of, it could even be the micro traumas. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be loss or divorce or sexual trauma or bullying. A lot of times we've all been bullied, but it also depends on, were our caregivers supportive of it? For mine, I remember in the 7th grade coming home and having a bully, threaten me in school, and I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go, to the bathroom, because that's where they were. And, I think from our culture, it was like, all right, study, just study. That's the answer to everything. Because if you get good straight A's, then, it doesn't matter. Well, taking a really small situation for me back then was huge. So basically you're gaslighting the kid, into thinking that it's their fault, and we're not even addressing the big elephant in the room. And so if that was your upbringing, or even if maybe you were a latchkey kid and you just weren't talked to about these things and you had to learn the hard way, or maybe you had helicopter parents where they're calling the teachers to have you move the test, so that when they get into college and they fail their first test, they want to, take their own life. And I've seen that. I've talked to some of those moms, in these really amazing neighborhoods in the country, because they are like, how do we teach resiliency to our kids? And this is happening, obviously way more often within the last 5 years than ever before. And, and again, because if we know better, we want to sometimes solve our kids' problems instead of actually giving them agency to actually fail in a safe way and say, you know what, that's okay. We can pick up again.
I'm laughing because I did that. So I have 9 kids.
What?
Yeah, I know. And that I have no justification for that. But I've got
9. Oh
9.
My gosh, you're my spirit animal. You're my hero.
Oh wow. Well, thank you for that. But we had 3 and thought we were done. I was still a pro cyclist at the time, and we were traveling and stuff. So we had 3 and we're done. So then we had a gap, and then we've got the second litter in essence after that. And the first ones I had, I took, it was part of my own Superman complex, and I'm just going to take care of everything. And I don't even think I was trying to coddle them. I'm going to take care of that. And how I did not give them agency. We talk about it now. The younger kids, I kind of stepped back, and I was just burning out from trying to do everything. And so I kind of stepped back, and then I'm also realizing this and going, oh my gosh, I'm totally robbing them of the ability to do it. And when I stepped back to realize how much they just took care of on their own, my plate got way cleaner, or emptier, I should say, 1. And 2, they're amazing. I can't believe that I tried to take care and protect and shield and fix and whatever with my older kids. So I had a unique, look at that. And so I talk about, I was given this bounce back, an aspect of it at least, from my family. You fit 2 big categories, obviously. One is, now you weren't an immigrant, right? But your parents both were. Mm-hmm. And we know that, what do they call it? The immigrant effect, whatever. They come over and see just opportunity and they kick butt for the most part.
Right.
So you had that going for you. And then there's a study, and Zig Ziglar always cited it, and I never found the actual study, but where they did it of all these world leaders, whether it's CEOs or the big world changers or whatnot. And it was something like, and I'm grandly paraphrasing, 80% or so of them came from poverty, or they or their siblings had some kind of a handicap or whatever, like you, who death from that, and you learn that it's just not all about you, and you're forced to be resilient or be overcome by it. So you had, you had both of those that happened to you. Now you're not going to go. That's the interesting thing with kids. You're not going to go create trauma for your kids.
Right. No. And I mean, in many ways, I think that at some level, they will have their own battles to face. Right. And I think that we can try to hopefully we can try to help with that. And that's kind of where that, step 2 of the bounce factor comes in, where we are able to, yes, question our past and actually make peace with it. Sometimes we favored a parent. Sometimes we were slighted by a parent or a caregiver. Sometimes we've been holding grudges around it. Or maybe we've realized that the boys were treated differently and the girls were treated differently. Or, birth order, you're treated differently, right? And there's sibling rivalry. Whatever that case is, that's all in the upbringing. Now, this can also be, well, what did you learn to be true when you were younger? And now you think everyone is bad. It's kind of like when that case of Pri, who's dating, she's had a couple of bad apples in dating, and now she thinks all men are bad, or whatever the case is. A type of guy is terrible because she got ghosted a few times, right? And so, well, we have to look back at our past patterns and see, is that relevant? And do we actually believe those things? So that's part 1 is your upbringing. Part 2 is looking at your current environment. And this is the big one. This is like, you can't change your past, obviously, but what we can do is we can look at our current environment and see, how am I complacent? Because that's what I told those moms who had children who did take their lives, or they did lose 3 people to suicide that year. When I spoke in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, you have a lot of high achievers. And so this was literally one of the things that I spoke about, because one of the moms got wind of my work around resilience and grit. And they said, wow, you've been through a lot as a teenager. Can you come and speak to the moms? Because what are we doing wrong? And is there a solution? How can we build resiliency in our teens? And because we just lost 3 people this year. And this was, a while back, but it really got me thinking and how I could really crystallize this framework, because, and what is actually needed. And you cite the Zig Ziglar, study, and definitely you can see, study after study, seeing the adversity and, even putting kids through sports, right? That helps build a healthy foundation of seeing, okay, this is what failure looks like. This is what setbacks look like. I'm not going to do everything for you, but we're actually slowly building the cadence to suck at something new. And that's looking at our current environment. We're actually activating good stress, because when we're activating good stress by saying yes to the things that we are afraid of, right? It's kind of like, I grew up in, a Filipino Indian household. And so you don't talk back to your elders. You don't, you speak when you're spoken to, kind of a thing. But when I would see my Jewish neighbors and their kids, they had a bar mitzvah, and doing a whole speech while they were 12 or whatever, 13. And I'm like, wow, that's different. I could never do that. And again, it's because at those ages, they're primed to speak in public. Well, what's the number one fear that everybody has? Public speaking. Can we start that sooner? And so, and this kind of goes into, it's perfect.
Thanks for joining us in the discussion. That again is Dr. Neeta Bhushan. You can find her anywhere you type her name in, Neeta, Neeta, and then Bhushan is Bhushan. The book that I was referencing is called That Sucked, Now What? How to Embrace the Joy in Chaos and Find Magic in the Mess. And wherever you're listening to this right now, you can find her at The Brave Table. It's a really big podcast, a lot of similar guests as what I have here on this podcast as well. Till next time, here's to you and me making better meaning in our lives and experiencing the miracle of living.
Yeah.